Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we've got a requested comparison. This is, of course, the Spyderco Shaman, and what we have with it is the AD10. And I think a number of you requested this because you're thinking along the lines of, sort of a hard use Spyderco versus a hard use cold steel. And those are very different things, guys. Spyderco doesn't tend to emphasize the hard use aspect of knives to the same degree that cold steel does. And so there's going to be some differences along those lines, but you're right. This is a pretty heavy duty Spyderco. And so if there is going to be a Spyderco that makes sense to compare, this is probably a good one. We've got a pretty significant difference in size and weight right off the bat, and that may put off some of you before we even really get into the video. So this guy's 8¼ inches, this guy's 8¾ inches. This guy has a 3 5/8 inch blade. This is a 3 9/16 inch blade, which is over 3 3/4 inches. We've got the same one thing that's interesting here is this dimension here is 3 3/4, and guess what? This dimension here is also 3 3/4. Now we've got a more generous finger choil. Both have the choil. Here you got to be a little more precise about it. On this guy, you could have pretty fat sausage fingers, and that choil is going to be just fine. So that's that's really more of an ergonomic comparison, but since we're talking about grip area, bring it up. The other big thing here is closed length on these two is going to be way different. So let me close these so you can actually see. This knife is going to be quite big at 5 5/16. This is taking up a lot of pocket real estate. It's also quite thick, and it's also quite tall in this dimension. All right, well, the Shaman is actually under 5 inches. It's 4 3/4 inches closed. It's under 2 inches in terms of this width here, and it's a thinner knife as well. All right, so you can pretty much tell when it comes to the space in pocket, the Shaman is going to be much more comfortable in pocket. And finally, the weight here, which we haven't even brought up yet, the Shaman is only 4.8 ounces, at least in this configuration. Well, the AD10 is 6.8 ounces. So 4.8 versus 6.8, that's a significant difference. So when it comes to size, weight, and carry, yeah, you are dealing with two completely different knives here. All right. Now, when it comes to utility, in terms of what you're actually going to be able to get done with both, perhaps you would argue, and you wouldn't be all that far off, that, hey, if I can carry, 2 ounces less and something that takes up a lot less space in my pocket and get pretty well all the same utility, then that's going to be my choice. And that may be a legitimate argument, and we'll talk about that as we work through some of the other aspects. But in terms of just size, weight, and carry, there's no question at all that the Spyderco comes out ahead in that department. Moving on to the blade. The blades here are actually going to be very similar under normal circumstances. Now, this is one of the first runs of AD10s that came out, and it has a hollow grind. I'm really glad that I got this one. The Shamans have always had a flat grind. Now, the new AD10s have a flat grind as well. And so cold steel, look, they're known to make tough blades that still cut really well. And guess what we have on the Shaman? We have a tough blade that cuts really well. So these two blades, you can see the stock is a little bit thicker, but not that much. Let's see here. Yeah, you're not going to be able to see that. So the stock is a little bit thicker on the AD10, not a huge amount thicker. All right. In terms of carrying that thickness and strength out to the tip, the AD10 does do a little bit better than the Shaman. But in terms of actual cutting performance, these are going to be very similar in the standard version. Now here, I'm going to get a little bit of an advantage because of that hollow grind. The newest ones of the newest AD10s are not going to have a hollow grind. So let me put it to you this way. In my comparison, all right, oh, by the way, S35 VN would normally be the steel, is the steel. Here, this is the Crewwear Sprint Run, but normally this would be S30V. Okay, now, here's the point. If we had two standard knives where they were just factory as they come brand new right now, You'd have a flat grind here, you'd have S30V here, and given that situation, I would call these a tie. Now, with these two knives, it becomes a completely different question because I actually like the grind better on this AD10 than I like the grind on the Shaman. However, I like the steel a little better on the Shaman than I like on the AD10. So there's like multiple different options here. Okay, so if I was comparing a standard S30V Shaman to this hollow ground AD10, I would take this hollow ground blade because that steel is crew wear, which I do like quite a bit. Um, that makes it a little tougher. I guess I'd still probably go with the hollow grind because, frankly, once you get to these high-end steels, like, anything S30V and above, who cares, right? They're so close that for the average user, it's not going to make any difference. It's sort of, they're all high-tier steels and they're going to perform pretty darn well. All right. So in that, if we kind of given that qualification, then I'm going to take the hollow ground blade over the flat ground blade, especially these two blades. All right. That's not going to always be my preference, but certainly in this case, it is. All right. So those are the blades, and that's how it comes down. Really, I've got to call it a tie because we're kind of pretending that these are two factory blades here. Moving on to lockup. So what we have on the AD10 is, of course, everyone knows the Triad Lock from Cold Steel. And I have to say, the absolute best implementation of the Triad Lock I have ever felt. This is easy to disengage. It's smooth. It's drop shut. Look at that. Snaps open really quickly. Fantastic, fantastic implementation of the Triad Lock. And I've asked in a couple of other videos and other people who have an AD10, and by all accounts, the lock is really, really well done, better than most other cold steels. So we've got the Triad Lock in its best configuration versus the compression lock. The compression lock is not going to be as strong as the Triad Lock, but in these two knives, it's not going to be all that much easier because this one is so good. All right. Now, I do want to point out here, when we're talking about lock strength and comparing the lock strength, it's important to note that the compression lock is not just a reverse liner lock. That's not the way it functions. So on a liner lock, this spring, okay, the one you can see in here, is resting on the bottom of the blade tang here. And what you're trying to do when you close the knife when it's locked is to compress that spring. Okay, so it can't close because this lock is this spring, the whole thing is being pushed down and it can't move. Now, in a compression lock, there is no pressure pushing on this whole spring. That's not the way the compression lock works. Instead, the portion of this piece of steel that's under compression is just the little tab that you can see in there under the stop pin. So watch when I move this over. How do I do it without? Well, this stinks. Okay, so you can see when I move that tab over, all right, what's happening is there's a little tab that's stuck between that stop pin and the tang of the blade. And by removing it, I can now allow the blade to move. So it's actually just that little tiny piece of steel that's under compression. All right. Now, if you know something, or really just apply common sense. All right. If you've got something that's long and thin, okay, and you load it versus something that's short and stubby and you load it, which one is going to perform better? Okay. I think we all know the shorter, stubbier one is going to perform better. And so the compression lock, all right, is a little tiny piece of steel, a little tab of steel that's under compression, and therefore is going to, at least in theory, perform better than your average liner lock. Okay, now you have to say average there because there could be a liner lock that's like 1/4 of an inch thick and it's just ridiculously strong, and there are too many variables to make a sweeping statement about this, but Generally speaking, the compression lock is going to be stronger than a liner lock, although it's not going to be as strong as the Triad Lock. Now, I know there's some testing out there, and I've seen a couple of different videos where people did like a lock strength test on a compression lock knife, and they don't do crazy amazingly well. Like, they don't do as well as your average Axis lock, and they certainly don't do as well as a Triad Lock. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of put that out there. Too much discussion on locks here, but all that to say, the Triad Lock is much stronger. The compression lock is much funner, at least in my account. And it all depends on which one you enjoy the most. If I'm sitting on the couch watching TV, I definitely like to have this knife with me and kind of be able to flick it and play with it because it works really, really well for that. I'm not so inclined to do that with the Triad Lock. It's just a functioning lock. Okay, so I think we've got to, all of that said, I think we've got to give lock to the got to give the lockup to the Triad Lock as the winner. So far we've got size and weight, the Shaman wins. Blade, the AD10 wins in this configuration, or it's a tie in, but they're both from factory because they're just too similar. And in lockup, the Triad Lock takes the win. So far we've got one for the Shaman, one for the AD10, and one tie. Moving on to handle. Well, we have contoured G10 on both of these normally. Here we have contoured micarta, which is fantastic. Here we have nested stainless steel liners. Over here we've got aluminum liners. Both of these are very, very comfortable in hand. The ergonomics for both deserve a lot of credit. If you like a really comfortable knife, if you're a person that does a lot of work with your folding knife, and therefore you want something that doesn't fatigue your hand, that feels really, really great when you're holding it, then either one of these is going to be fantastic. But I have to say this. When you just get these in hand and you have to decide, like if I was going to be cutting stuff all day, if I've got miles of cardboard to cut or something like that, which one of these would I want? And there's really no debating. As soon as you feel these in hand, you would definitely lean toward the AD10. Now, this is where I said the pocket discussion has to come up. Okay, so in pocket, the Shaman is much smaller. All right. And that's because there's so much less girth to the handle. Now, if you're doing a lot of hard work, you may be more than willing to trade off and carry something bigger and heavier because of that extra girth in hand that makes it so comfortable. All right, so that's a trade-off you may want to make. Now, in terms of construction, I don't really have any complaints about the overall construction on these. We should have talked a little more, I guess, about action. Both of these are on washers. Both of them are quite good in terms of action. The one thing, anyway, we'll leave that aside. The main difference is going to be the lock. So let's get back to the handle here. Again, both handles feel great in hand. The other thing that may be a significant factor for you is the way the jimping is done on the Spyderco. So I've got this big generous choil. I've got a nice big spot for my thumb here at the back. It's very grippy and very natural. This just feels like it's meant to be in my hand. All right, if I switch over to the AD10, same thing. It feels like it's supposed to be in my hand, but it feels like that more back here. Once I move up here, it's not quite as good. And so if you're a person who uses the choil all the time, and with the Shaman, I only grip the Shaman like this. All right, I don't ever really hold it back here. It actually feels a little awkward to do. So in terms of comfort in hand, the AD10 definitely gets it, but you're making a trade-off in terms of size and how noticeable it is in pocket to get to that point. All right, let's finally wrap this up with sort of an overall discussion. Okay, here's where I think this becomes a little more interesting, okay? Because the Shaman is a hard-use, tough, durable, capable knife that is quite suitable to EDC. I have no problem recommending the Shaman as an EDC blade in the size and weight that it comes in. The AD10, however, is what I would call EDC plus, or maybe occasional carry, something that, yes, when I know I'm going to be out in the bush or I'm going to need that extra ability, I'm happy to carry something something of this size. However, for my general comfort and on a day-to-day basis, I'm much more likely to carry the Shaman around because it's much more convenient, and I'm not really sacrificing all that much. Okay, so that's how these. Oh, by the way, price point. I should have mentioned these are like 170 or 180, and these are $200. Now, I think the Shaman is a bit out of line. Okay, so if I was interested in buying a Shaman, I would be looking on the secondary market for sure, and hoping to pick one up for, between $150 and $200. The other thing is the AD10 has gone on a couple of pretty good sales and may do so again in the future. So, in terms of that value equation, they're both pretty steep, okay, for what you're getting. And there are other options that you may want to consider. If you think an AD10 is just too steep, look at an Ultimate Hunter, look at an American Lawman. If you think the Shaman is more than you want to pay, look at any of the Manixes. In fact, the Manix is quite similar to the Shaman, and I'll probably do a comparison like this between the Spyderco Manix 2 and the Shaman as well. So there you go, guys. That's how I feel like these two break down and how they compare to one another. Kind of an interesting video, and it really does beg the question, how much are you interested in being ready for? Okay, sure, with this knife, you're ready for almost anything. It is almost a fixed blade, and I hate to say that, but it really is one of the strongest knives out there, one of the strongest locks out there. It's just insanely overbuilt. Is it more overbuilt than the Shaman? Absolutely. However, if you know that in your average daily life you don't need to be ready for that kind of stuff, then the Shaman may be completely acceptable. And I would say for 99.9% of tasks, it is more than up to it, more than capable of anything you're going to need to throw at it. All right, so there you go. I know I was kind of all over the place with that video. I apologize for the scatterbrained thinking there. I hope you can make some sense out of it, and I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Oh, wait, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.